Imagine waking up one morning to find that your rent has gone up, your benefits have gone down, and your energy bill has doubled, all without you changing a single thing in your life. That is not a distant nightmare. It is the quiet reality creeping across the UK right now. New laws are reshaping how much help ordinary people receive, while prices keep rising in every direction. Families who were just about managing yesterday are suddenly one bill away from sinking. The question is simple: are you next on the list, or already feeling the ground disappear beneath you?
Number 1. The reduction of Universal Credit Work Allowance. The latest change to the Universal Credit Work Allowance is already being called one of the most damaging shifts for low-income families. This law lowers the amount a person can earn before their benefits begin to reduce. That means every extra pound earned results in a faster reduction of support. For many working parents, especially single mothers and households with disabilities, this creates an unavoidable financial squeeze. It hits those who are already balancing rent, bills, and childcare. Families who previously managed to keep a small financial cushion will now see that safety margin disappear each month, turning affordability into a daily battle. Research from multiple UK social policy organisations shows that lowering the work allowance is likely to push thousands of people into relative poverty. This is because the new calculation subtracts more from benefits even when wages remain the same. People who are already working long hours won't suddenly earn more, so they are left with less total income. Rent is rising, energy costs are unpredictable, and food inflation remains high. When support is reduced at the same time, the simple act of planning a monthly budget becomes nearly impossible. The result is a silent financial pressure that grows stronger month after month. Families affected by these changes report cutting back on basic necessities like heating and food just to stay afloat. Many are left questioning whether working more hours even helps, since the benefit reductions cancel out a portion of the increased wages. This creates a real-life poverty trap that punishes effort instead of supporting progress. People who were once stable now face choices that no household should ever experience: pay rent or buy groceries, keep the lights on or refill essential prescriptions. The new law deeply reshapes daily living for those who rely on fair support to survive.
Number 2. The freeze on local housing allowance, LHA, rates. The local housing allowance, LHA, freeze is becoming one of the most financially damaging changes for renters on low income. This law freezes the amount of housing support people can receive, even though rent prices continue rising across the UK. When support stays the same but rent increases every year, the shortfall must be paid directly from the individual's pocket. Families that were barely managing to cover monthly rent are now falling behind, creating a spiral of arrears, late fees, and constant fear of eviction. For many households, especially in London, Manchester, Birmingham, and coastal areas, rent consumes more than half of their income, leaving almost nothing for food, energy, or transport. Recent studies show that this freeze will push thousands closer to housing insecurity, especially single parents, disabled tenants, and young workers who already live paycheck to paycheck. Landlords have no requirement to keep rents affordable, and many are increasing prices as mortgage rates rise. Since support no longer reflects real rental market trends, families are forced into overcrowded housing, unsafe neighborhoods, or long-distance relocations far from their jobs and support systems. Losing access to community networks often leads to higher childcare costs, longer commutes, and disrupted schooling for children, making financial survival even harder. People affected by this law describe a constant feeling of pressure as every month becomes a battle to stay housed. Some skip meals to avoid falling behind on rent, while others rely on food banks even though they work full-time. Energy bills, council tax, and transport costs become secondary after rent is paid, turning everyday living into a cycle of sacrifice. The biggest risk is that this freeze increases vulnerability to homelessness, not because individuals made bad choices, but because the law forces them to operate on a budget that no longer reflects real housing costs. households become financially punished simply for renting a home.
Number 3, the expansion of the benefit cap. The expansion of the benefit cap has become another major legal shift, pushing thousands toward financial struggle. This law lowers the maximum total amount a household can receive in benefits regardless of their circumstances, family size, or regional living costs. Even households with several children, disabled family members, or high unavoidable expenses are restricted by the new cap. The most affected cities are those with the highest rents, such as London and Bristol, where the cost of living already outpaces wages. When the cap takes effect, support is automatically reduced, and no assessment is made on whether the remaining income is enough to meet basic needs. For many families, each new payment now arrives short before the month even begins. Research from multiple UK poverty watchdogs highlights a sharp rise in financial vulnerability connected directly to the expanded cap. Families who were previously managing to stay stable now lose hundreds of pounds monthly without having any realistic path to compensate. Most of the affected households already work, yet low wages and high living costs leave no room for further reductions. The financial impact becomes most severe for single parents who must balance job responsibilities with childcare. Unexpected events such as illness, school holidays, or reduced working hours quickly turn into budget disasters. When a cap cuts support while wages remain stagnant, the line between being stable and being overwhelmed becomes dangerously thin. People under the expanded cap describe the change as a sudden collapse of financial security. A family that once afforded school meals and heating is now calculating whether to skip lunches or reduce medication. Reduced support almost always forces families into high-interest borrowing, trapping them in long-term debt. Daily life becomes shaped by fear and constant budgeting stress rather than progress or comfort. The new law punishes households for situations they cannot control and pushes them into long-term poverty with no realistic escape route.
Number 4. Stricter disability benefit assessments. The introduction of stricter disability benefit assessments has become one of the most controversial legal changes impacting vulnerable individuals across the UK. This law increases the criteria a person must meet to qualify for disability-related financial support, affecting both new applicants and existing claimants. People with chronic pain, mental health conditions, neurological disorders, and fluctuating illnesses are now being reassessed under tougher rules that don't fully consider invisible disabilities or conditions that vary day to day. Many individuals who previously qualified for support are now losing it, even though their health has not improved. When someone already struggling with medical needs suddenly receives less income, the financial stress directly worsens their symptoms, creating an impossible cycle. Reports from disability advocacy groups show a sharp rise in benefit sanctions, rejections, and reductions following the new assessment laws. The system places heavy emphasis on physical tasks during assessments, ignoring cognitive fatigue, sensory overload, and unpredictable pain spikes. For thousands, the official score determines whether they can afford medication, therapy, nutritious food, or accessible transport. When support is cut, individuals are still expected to manage rising living costs despite limited ability to work. This pushes many people into severe hardship, especially those who must now choose between attending medical appointments and paying their household bills. Without financial stability, basic health management becomes nearly impossible. People affected by these changes describe the experience as emotionally crushing, because the law treats disability as though it must be constantly proven rather than lived with. Many report skipping meals to afford prescriptions or reducing heating to keep mobility aids charged. Some push themselves to work extra hours despite medical advice, worsening their long-term health just to survive short-term expenses. This law creates a poverty trap that punishes individuals for conditions they never chose, disconnecting support from real-world health needs. Losing disability benefits not only damages finances, but also strips people of dignity and security.
Number 5. The two-child benefit limit expansion. The two-child benefit limit expansion has become one of the toughest financial pressures on low-income families.
It restricts financial support to only the first 2 children in a household, regardless of real living expenses or the parents' earnings. Families with 3 or more children now receive far less support, while food, school supplies, clothing and housing costs continue climbing. Parents who are already stretched thin by rent and energy bills now face a monthly gap that gets harder to manage. This law reshapes daily budgeting and pushes families dangerously close to financial crisis fast. Research from child poverty organizations shows that the expanded limit disproportionately affects larger families who are already operating on the edge of affordability. The calculations no longer match current economic conditions, and the new support levels ignore inflation, housing instability, and regional price differences. Even when both parents work full-time, the lost income can remove hundreds of pounds from the household budget every month. The pressure is especially intense for single parents who receive no additional support despite rising childcare fees and reduced benefit protections. Financial losses caused by this law increase the likelihood of debt, hunger, and overcrowded living arrangements nationwide. Families affected by the 2-child limit share devastating real-life consequences, especially during school terms and winter months, when costs peak. Many describe skipping meals to ensure their children eat or limiting heating to protect rent payments. Birth order has become a financial barrier, forcing some parents to stretch resources so thin that each child receives less than what is necessary for healthy growth. The law does not account for unexpected events like illness, reduced working hours, or sudden bills, which quickly push households into arrears. The expansion effectively punishes parents for having larger families and increases long-term poverty risks for children.
Number 6. Cuts to council tax support for low-income households. The cuts to council tax support are silently creating one of the most immediate financial pressures on low-income households. This law reduces the level of assistance provided to people who already struggle to cover essential bills, meaning more residents must now pay a higher portion of council tax out of their limited income. Families who were previously exempt or partially supported are suddenly responsible for payments they cannot realistically afford. The change hits hardest during months when rent, utilities, and food costs peak, turning a once manageable bill into a serious source of debt and anxiety. For many households, every small increase matters when there's no financial room left to adjust. Studies from national budgeting charities show that these cuts have already driven a sharp rise in council tax arrears, a debt category that often escalates quickly because non-payment triggers enforcement action. When a family falls behind, they face late penalties, letters from collection agencies, and the risk of court involvement. The system does not soften for families dealing with unstable employment, illness, or emergency costs. People who miss payments to prioritize food, heating, or school expenses are treated no differently from those who choose not to pay. As a result, the law does not encourage financial responsibility, but instead traps households in growing debt they can never realistically clear. People affected by the council tax support cuts describe the financial pressure as constant and draining. Some have reduced grocery spending, skipped essential travel, or lowered heating use just to keep up with payments that previously caused no issue. Households that were barely staying stable now experience monthly panic as bills accumulate faster than income. The change separates surviving from drowning by only a small miscalculation, leaving families one unexpected expense away from debt collection. These cuts push thousands into poverty and long-term financial instability, not because they refuse to pay, but because the law removes the fairness that once protected them.
Number 7. New rules on job-seeking requirements for parents. The new job-seeking requirement rules for parents are becoming another major driver of financial pressure for families already balancing work and childcare.
This law forces parents with children as young as 1 to adhere to strict job search conditions in order to continue receiving benefits. Parents must attend frequent job centre appointments, apply for a set number of jobs weekly, and accept any suitable work offered or risk sanctions. The rules ignore childcare shortages, rising nursery fees, and the lack of flexible job opportunities for parents with young children. When support is at risk unless unrealistic conditions are met, families are pushed toward a stressful and unstable financial situation that grows worse every month. Reports from employment and child welfare organizations show that these rules are causing a sharp rise in benefit sanctions. Parents who miss an appointment due to a sick child or school closure can lose a significant portion of their income for weeks. The assumption that work is always accessible fails to reflect real job market limitations. Many available jobs require long hours, unpredictable shifts, or travel that parents cannot commit to without reliable childcare. When a parent accepts unsuitable work to avoid sanctions, they often end up spending more on childcare and transport than they earn. Financial stress increases even for those trying to follow the rules exactly as required. Parents affected by the new requirements describe living in fear of losing support through no fault of their own. Some must choose between attending a compulsory job appointment and caring for a sick child, with either choice bringing consequences. Others accept poorly paid jobs simply to avoid sanctions, only to fall deeper into debt because wages do not cover childcare costs. These rules create a poverty trap, where working more does not guarantee stability, and failing to meet impossible conditions triggers income cuts. Families are left managing punishment rather than progress, turning parenting into a financial struggle rather than a supported responsibility.
Number 8. Rising energy price policies without increase in support payments. The rising energy price policies without matching increases in support payments have become one of the fastest ways households are being pushed into poverty. Energy tariffs continue climbing because of global market volatility, infrastructure pressures, and supplier costs. Yet government support has not been adjusted to reflect the real price of heating and electricity. Families who once heated their homes comfortably during winter now face bills that consume a massive portion of their income. Those already on tight budgets are forced to ration heating, switch off essential appliances, or live in unsafe indoor temperatures. This law-driven gap between energy prices and financial support turns normal household comfort into a monthly financial burden. Research from consumer energy watchdogs shows that thousands of households are already falling into energy debt, especially those with children, disabled members, and elderly residents who need consistent heating. Even full-time workers are slipping into arrears because wages have not kept up with inflation, while energy support schemes remain outdated. Many families now depend on emergency top-ups or temporary payment plans, only to see debt snowball when the winter months arrive. Energy companies introduce stricter repayment requirements, while the law offers no additional protections. When support fails to rise with costs, energy becomes a privilege rather than a basic necessity, and poverty expands quietly inside people's homes. Households affected by these changes describe feeling scared to open their monthly bills, knowing an unavoidable payment is coming whether they have the money or not. Children doing homework in cold rooms, elderly people restricting heating to avoid arrears, and parents skipping meals to keep the meter running on our common real-life situations. Families are not overspending, they are under-supported, while energy prices soar. The lack of policy adjustment forces people to choose between warmth and food. This law-driven imbalance turns everyday living into financial survival and deepens long-term poverty across the country.
Number 9. Tougher sanctions for missed universal credit appointments. The tougher sanctions for missed universal credit appointments have intensified financial hardship for thousands of people living with unpredictable schedules, unstable work hours, or health challenges. Under this law, missing or rescheduling a job centre appointment can result in immediate benefit cuts, even when the reason is legitimate. Illness, Emergency childcare issues, transport delays, and employer schedule changes are no longer accepted as reasonable justifications in most cases. When support is reduced abruptly, families who rely on every pound to survive are left with a sudden income drop that triggers rent arrears, food insecurity, and debt. This law places punishment over understanding and turns ordinary life disruptions into financial catastrophes. Reports from multiple poverty research groups show that these sanctions disproportionately affect individuals with mental health conditions, fluctuating disabilities, and zero-hour contracts. People who actively want to work are penalized when their job obligations clash with appointment times. Parents who prioritize a sick child or carers supporting elderly family members must choose between their responsibility and their income. Losing benefits for weeks at a time pushes many into high-interest borrowing, and as debts accumulate, it becomes nearly impossible to recover stability. The policy claims to encourage responsibility, yet it creates a cycle where people are sanctioned for circumstances they cannot control. Individuals affected by the stricter sanctions describe living with constant anxiety, knowing a single unexpected event could destroy their monthly budget. Some fear answering the phone or checking the post because they expect another warning or penalty. Many reduce spending on food and heating just to stay prepared for future sanctions. When support is withdrawn even temporarily, there is no safety net to catch families already struggling to stay afloat. This law transforms basic social support into a system of punishment that pushes vulnerable households into deep and lasting poverty.
Number 10. The increase in minimum income floor for self-employed workers. The increase in the minimum income floor for self-employed workers has become another major policy shift, pushing thousands toward poverty. Under this law, universal credit now assumes that every self-employed person earns a fixed minimum income each month, regardless of what they actually make. If their real income falls below that threshold, support is still reduced as if they earned more. People running small businesses, freelancers, delivery drivers, hairdressers, cleaners, tutors, and creators are now penalized during slow months. Income drops are treated as though they do not exist, even though the bills remain the same. This law ignores the reality that self-employment income rises and falls across different seasons and markets. Studies from financial support networks show that the new minimum income floor is already increasing financial instability for self-employed individuals who rely on universal credit to survive periods of low earnings. Many self-employed workers continue to put in long hours, yet receive less support because the system assumes they earn more than they actually do. When personal revenue dips due to cancelled clients, market changes, health issues, or seasonal demand, support does not adjust to reflect the shortfall. People who built small businesses to remain independent now face a monthly income gap that rapidly leads to arrears, debt, and anxiety. This removes the flexibility that once made self-employment a viable income option. People affected by this change describe feeling punished for working hard and trying to be self-reliant. Some report selling equipment, downsizing their homes, or abandoning self-employment entirely to avoid unpredictable income losses. Others cut back on food, transport, phone data, or heating to cover the new financial gap. Instead of supporting small business growth, the new minimum income floor forces people to choose between their business and their basic needs. The change turns low-earning months into a direct path toward hardship, trapping self-employed workers in persistent and unavoidable poverty.
What is happening across the UK is not just a series of policy updates, it is a wave of changes that directly reshapes the daily lives of ordinary people. Every law discussed brings a different pressure, yet they all lead to the same destination: less support, higher costs, and deeper financial instability. Families working full-time are still struggling, parents are being forced into impossible choices, and people with disabilities are fighting to prove their conditions instead of receiving help to live with dignity. These laws create a system where doing everything right still isn't enough to stay secure. Poverty is no longer caused only by unemployment. It now comes from rising bills, shrinking support, and shrinking protections. This situation affects everyone: renters, workers, parents, disabled individuals, students, and the self-employed. When survival becomes the daily priority, there is no space left for growth, stability, or hope. The UK is reaching a point where financial hardship is becoming normal rather than exceptional, and that is a warning signal no one should ignore. If people don't understand how these laws impact them, the consequences arrive too late. Awareness is no longer optional, it is the only defense left. If you want more breakdowns about policies affecting families and workers, support this video by liking it, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than ever. Let's make sure it is heard.